On behalf of the Overseas Development Institute, the UK Aid, we thank everyone for coming. I'm pleasantly pleased to be here, considering the subject matter that's to be discussed. We need to move on very quickly and do this business unusual, because the paper says business as usual will not likely take the country to the right destination. I think it's time to listen to the keynote address by the Honorable Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment. This is not very surprising, but we have the right set of people here, and I'm sure she has a message for this very important launch event. Mrs. Aisha Abubakar, you have the floor, please.
It gives me great pleasure to be here as the keynote speaker at this laudable occasion of the public launch of a research paper aptly titled Supporting Economic Transformation in Nigeria by the Overseas Development Institute, ODI. I also wish to thank the DFID for their partnership and contribution to this work. Our nation's current state of affairs provides the opportunity for us to restructure and realize our developmental objectives and goals, to deliver on the change we are yearning for as a government and as a people. This has become intentional as programs and plans are being carried out. Growth in the GDP alone is not enough to transform an economy, but this must be accompanied by employment generation and increasing economic well-being of our people. Economic development is partial and economic transformation succeeds when all needed building blocks come together. This must be combined with skilled, innovative and creative human capital, entrepreneurship, vision and resilience, complemented with committed leadership, fairness, justice and equity. It is therefore the aspiration of the Nigerian government to address all challenges hindering the path of economic growth. Our focus has shifted away from import of finished goods and primary or raw materials exports to the exportation of manufactured goods and services, and we have put in place policies and programs to encourage this. The importance of the manufacturing sector in a developing economy cannot be overstated. Manufacturing provides employment and reduces poverty. This is a well-known fact. Economic development not only raises incomes, but encourages citizens to join in the political discourse. Economic growth rate and ultimate development of nations are determined by a number of factors that range from sound policies, effect and efficient public and private investments, and strong institutions. One key variable that determines how fast nations outgrow each other is the speed of accumulation of human capital, especially through sound formal and informal science and technological education. In the 60s, the GDP per capita of the following countries were slightly different from that of Nigeria. South Korea, Brazil were below $200, with Singapore and Malaysia with a little over $300, and Chile slightly above $500, while that of our country was just $100. By 2011, per capita range for all the five grew, but Nigeria was left behind. How did these nations achieve such outstanding economic performance over the last 5 decades? How did these nations become productively wealthy over the last 50 years while Nigeria remained where it was? How did the majority of the citizens of these nations join the upper middle class while more Nigerians would regress into poverty? The present change of government of President Muhammadu Buhari has since its inception provided additional interventions to support specific private sectors, the non-oil sector, and youth entrepreneurship, amongst others. It is instructive to note that Mr. President has remained focused on the diversification of this economy, despite the myriad of problems we encountered. Singapore is what it is today due to the extraordinary altruistic efforts, sacrifices, and hard choices of its founding father, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. What is important is not the extent to which the country lags behind, but the potential the country has to catch up. I have read the paper we are launching today and find it most assuring that this administration is thinking along the same lines, and today provides a great opportunity for us to share some of the reforms our government has already embarked upon to diversify our economy, create jobs and prosperity, and ultimately economic transformation. In this regard, the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has started a difficult but rewarding task of breaking free from our traditional dependence on oil to the non-oil sector. However, unlocking Nigeria's investment and economic potentials require the strategic collaboration of both the public and private sectors to achieve the desired accelerated development. To this end, our ministry has set up the policy thrust to focus on fundamental restructuring and diversification of the economy to ensure sustainable growth and creation of jobs in the country. Our focus is now anchored on 4 pillars, which are creating an enabling environment for industry, trade and investment, implementing the Nigerian Industrial Revolution Plan, championing the cause of Nigeria's MSMEs as a means of creating jobs and achieving inclusive growth, and attracting proactively long-term local and foreign investment by working on improving our ranking on the ease of doing business by the World Bank. We have also identified key industries where as a nation we have an advantage. One of these is cement, of which we are now a net exporter. This policy has been successfully implemented and is being followed closely by sugar, tomatoes, and the cotton and textiles industry. The Bank of Industry has funds in place to encourage the capital investment needed in the establishment of sugar plantations and others for refineries, for instance. Vital institutions under the purview of our ministry, such as the Bank of Industry, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, Industrial Trading Fund, and the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, have accordingly been restructured and relocated towards diversifying the productive base of the economy away from oil and to foster market-oriented, private sector-driven economy through market-oriented exports. By the launch of this research paper, I am very optimistic that our country stands to gain a lot from this worthwhile effort in our quest for industrial development. To wrap up, let me state here that we have the labor force, we have the intellectual prowess and resources needed for our socio-economic development. It is now mandatory that all Nigerians put in place the needed sacrifices to take Nigeria where we need to be. Failure is not an option for us. Project Nigeria, as the fancies are, this is unimaginable. Thank you and God bless Nigeria.
Thank you, the Honorable Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Mrs. Aisha Abubakar. Let's give her another round of applause. She has set a tone for the next couple of hours discussion, and I think we'll take it up from there. But of course, as we're aware, the paper was written by a number of Nigerian and other international experts. 4 of them were listed. Perhaps you've seen their names in the first paragraph of the program of events. I'm sure you can see the names there. Dirk is one of them, David, and Ebere and Daniel Zega. So you find quite a lot of good heads put together to produce this 60-page document. Now we need to listen to Doc William, who will represent other authors of the report, to give us about 20 minutes presentation. Doc, would you mind to come over here, please? Let's put our hands together for Doc William. Let's come to the eye to give us about 20 minutes.
Today I will be talking about the paper, and it will discuss 5 issues. So first of all, I'll be looking at the transformation potential and the economic transformation record so far in Nigeria. I'll then look at the policy challenge. We'll then look at the economic potential, then at the policy reform potential, and then how to make it happen. And these are sort of the issues that we look at when we think about economic transformation in countries. It's based on the paper that you've got in front of you. I still have a couple of spare copies for those who haven't got a copy. It's based on the paper by a number of authors. So you saw David Booth. He is at the Overseas Development Institute. He's a political scientist. There's also Danny Leipziger. He was a director at the World Bank of the PREM, the Poverty Reduction Economic Management Unit, for quite some time, and he was the author of the Growth Commission report in 2008. And also Ebere Umeze, who in his capacity was when he was writing this, he was the director of the CC think tank. Okay, let's look at the transformational deficit, as we call it. So, GDP per capita, as the Honourable Minister has already alluded to, hasn't been growing enough in Nigeria. It has grown, but not enough, and it's by far not enough to catch up, to keep up with China, or look at Korea, what it has been able to achieve. Nigeria's investment to GDP ratio has also been very low. So there's been very low investment in Nigeria. And of course, if you've got low investment, you also have low growth and transformation. So compared to bigger other countries that have transformed, Korea, China, it's much lower. It's about 15% of GDP. And also, the economy hasn't changed that much. So labour has been able to has not been able to move very much out of the agriculture sector, and we see in particular the manufacturing sector still well below other countries. It's also the share of manufacturing as a percent of GDP is less than 10% at the moment, even on the rebased data, and that's lower than the average of sub-Saharan Africa, which is above 10%, and it's way behind some of the other economies. Okay, so that's a transformational deficit. We also have on the next slide the some charts about the problems on competitiveness in the Nigerian economy, and that's also a facet of the transformational deficit. We find, for example, that the share of exports in by traditional commodities or petroleum, oil, and the like is very high, whereas the diversified products, the share of that is very low. Now, what we also find is that this is the data from the World Bank, the real effective exchange rate, and it's been appreciating for quite some time. And whenever you see this, I think you need to think about some worrying signs, because you would lose competitiveness unless, of course, you can compensate for it by high quality of the products. But it's been going up quite a lot, so this is 130, this is 70, so quite a lot of change. And on the left-hand side, far left, you find a measure of the complexity of the export basket in countries, and it's been produced by Hausman, Ricardo Hausman, and a number of other authors. And if you look at that, then you find that Nigeria's economic complexity and the complexity of its export is low, and it's lower compared to some other countries. And it's also well below, for example, Indonesia, which is also has been an oil-dependent economy, but it has been able to diversify, and it's become much more complex. Okay, the next slide. This slide, you won't be able to see very much on this. This is the product space, and it compares two countries, Nigeria and Indonesia. And Nigeria and Indonesia in the 60s had a similar level of complexity in terms of its export basket. Then Indonesia became much more complex, and it added many more products, and it was diversifying into products, manufacturing products that were complex. And once you are diversifying in more complex products, you're more able to move into other products as well. It becomes easier because you build up your capabilities to move into one product. Once you've done that, you can more easily go into other products. So that's what Indonesia's done. And in Nigeria, that hasn't been the case. It's been hasn't been diversified, it's been concentrated in those products that are at the periphery of the product space, which make it more difficult to move into those products that are useful for diversification. Okay, the next slide. So it would have been good if Nigeria had diversified more, and we've been looking at, for example, the resilience of economies to the current slowdown, and this is then Sub-Saharan Africa as a whole. And if you look at its export, it actually of manufacturing, it has actually increased. It actually in Africa, manufacturing over the last decade has doubled. But if you compare manufacturing exports with commodity exports and the value of that, and you look at year-on-year growth rates, and you look at it up until sort of the January 2016, you see that the year-on-year commodity exports to the US EU and Japan together has dropped by 30% in value. Of course, the price of oil has come down in other reasons. But the manufacturing exports from Africa hasn't fallen, or not fallen that much, so a bit at the end, but it's been sort of stable. So if you had been diversified in manufacturing goods, you would have been a bit more resilient to the crisis. Okay, let's move to the policy challenge. We know that there is a big transformational challenge out there. Business as usual is not going to do it in terms of generating jobs that are needed. So what we did, and this was a piece done by Danny Leipziger for the paper, we looked at successful transformers, those that have transformed successfully over a number of decades. And for them, we looked at the lessons. And one of the lessons that you get is that competitiveness is absolutely the key in for countries to transform on a sustained basis. There's also important to invest in the basics, infrastructure and skills. Honourable Minister has already mentioned human capital, absolutely critical. Infrastructure is also a binding constraint by electricity. And on top of that, coherent industrial policy is also important. And for that, what we looked at is, for example, like a country like Korea. It's been able to emphasize competitiveness by exporting and by providing incentives to those firms, provided that they remain competitive by exporting. Okay, this is sort of some lessons from successful transformers. But there was another type of lesson, and it's basically how you do policy change. In the next slide. So there are critical aspects of policy formulation and implementation that also need to be adhered to if you want to transform. So not only about the content, but also about how you do it. The timing of policy change is important. The consistency of policy packages are important. Clarity of the objectives. You need to gather support for your policy changes. You need to think about early wins as well as the long-term commitments. And it's also important to monitor, evaluate, and implement corrective feedback or correction if the feedback is such that something doesn't work. And that's something that we also emphasized at the Transformation Forum that was organized by the African Center for Economic Transformation in Kigali 2 months ago, which we also co-funded. And there, Paul Kagame, the president, also said, well, countries make mistakes, and you experiment. You go into an avenue, and some things work, other things don't work. If they don't work, scale them down. If they do work, scale them up. And I think that's something that is important. That we shouldn't get stuck in sort of targets that we might not be able to meet by a long margin. But we need to also be realistic that if things don't work, then we can think about course correction. So if you're in the middle of your administration, you can correct and you can change track. Next slide. Now, we then looked at a range of studies to think about economic potential. And this is just a very brief summary. And there are a range of studies out there, whether it's by Justin Lin, whether it's by local economists, whether it's by government agencies, and they all have analysis of promising sectors. And I don't think there's a shortage of thinking about what are the promising sectors out there. And there are a range of techniques you can use. You can use revealed comparative advantage, so that's where the economy has been doing quite well compared to the rest of the world. You can think about where its productivity is high, and you can think about how to product space analysis. So think about what product space, what are the products that you're already exporting, and then see what products you can move into quite quickly that are close to your current export basket. And a range of products come out. This is very simple discussion of this. The food processing, assembly and light manufacturing, and also technology-intensive manufacturing, and a range of products there and sectors that are important. Now, there's also not a shortage of studies that suggesting what needs to be done, at least in the longer run. So this is sort of seems to me like a reasonable consensus of those factors that are important to promote transformation. It's core infrastructure, also targeted infrastructure. Think about power, integrated transport systems are important here. Access to finance, business environment, get the investment climate right, Honourable Minister was mentioning that. Lower import protection and lower trade costs to reduce import costs is important. And just to say here that if you think about moving into sectors, you don't have to move into whole sectors at the same time. That was something in the past, in the 60s. Countries were moving into whole sectors. These days, you need to think about value chain analysis. You need to think about where you fit into the value chain. You might occupy certain niches in the value chain. You need to import goods, you process them, and you export them. And so there are lots of opportunities out there. You don't have to build up whole industries behind protected walls. That's not what you do these days. You think about maintaining competitiveness and think about which niches you need to go into. And skills building is also an important element here. Okay, if we then look at what this all means for Nigeria, and we have already highlighted all the things that need to be done to successfully transform yourself. And we already mentioned, for example, that there is you need to do lots of policy at the same time. You need to focus on competitiveness. You need to think about a centralized agency to get it all done. But then if we then looked at Nigeria in the past, then the reform progress has been uneven. Some of the institutional arrangements are very good in the formal sense, but maybe in the informal sense were more tricky. There's still shortcomings. And in the past, if you looked at some of the industrial policies, they weren't sort of up to sort of the best practice standards, where you think more about sort of think about industrial policies by building competitive sectors and not behind protected walls, but thinking through more an open-minded model. And most success stories in Asia started in a single sector, single politically empowered public agencies. I suppose that is something to also learn from the past, is that, or in other countries, is that you don't have to have everything right at the same time. You can start in a single sector and work your way upwards. So how to make it happen? So we said there are a range of promising sectors. There are a range of policies, general policy suggestions that a range of high-quality studies have suggested. But it hasn't necessarily happened to the extent that we want in the past. So therefore, what we think is it's important to, when you move forward, that you demonstrate that you can think about these coherent industrial strategies, and you can think about promoting competitiveness, you can think about promoting exports, by demonstrating in a range of projects, in a range of niche areas, that you're up to it, and you can work together with the public and the private sector together to get things done, to coordinate. It is a tall order to coordinate things. Think about special economic zones. Those that have been able to implement special economic zones successfully, and we now get some also examples in Africa, in the case of Ethiopia and Rwanda, where special economic zones have been built. They have been able to do so by coordinating import licenses, land rights, land titles, skills, infrastructure at the same time, and then attract investment. And that by attracting a few firms, you demonstrate that this is a viable investment proposition, and you can then build on that and move it forward. So think about demonstration projects. This is what experience in other countries have also been able to do. And so I mentioned some African examples. There are also examples in Philippines, for example, where a targeted group of institutions, individuals work together to think about investment climate. And you need to be politically smart, think about the right type of of interventions, and make sure that you build your consensus to build consensus to work for things. Business as usual is not going to generate a large increase in productive employment that the country needs. We've seen that there's been a transformational deficit. If there isn't going to be a major course correction, it is unlikely to live up to manufacturing skill sufficiently and think about exporting and think about diversity based enough to generate employment. Maybe we can build on recent actions. So there are some recent announcements that are going in the right direction. So think about part of the fuel subsidy being removed, thinking about a move towards flexible exchange rates, and on the next slide, the comments by the President. So I just copied the paragraph on the economy. And it talks about restructuring the economy and diversifying. It thinks about expanding our industrial and manufacturing base. It thinks about fiscal incentives for business that prove capable of manufacturing products that are internationally competitive. So there are things that we can build on and that we can implement. I'm thinking about maybe some demonstration projects that can demonstrate that this is possible to do. And that leads me to the final messages on the next slide, and maybe you can pull them up all at the same time, so they're forwards. I think a major message from our report, and that's what we all feel when we look at it as a core authors. We say that business as usual is not going to generate a large increase in productive employment that Nigeria needs. Successful transformation elsewhere has been supported by a coordinated push, a centralized agency, and that has pursued a path of transformation based on competitiveness. When we look at it in the case of Nigeria, and we've got an appendix on economic policy in Nigeria, we said that the experience so far has been one about persistence of looking at the domestic economy, where there was too weak coordination of national development efforts, and there hasn't been really enough of a consensus building around economic transformation, a nation's building project of economic transformation. Therefore, we suggest it's important for Nigeria to show its commitment to economic development and think about a range of carefully selected projects that demonstrate that progress in export-oriented transformation can be made, contributing to a shared vision of change. And that's really based on sort of thinking about these key policies that have been put up, think about the promising sectors, and then think about these demonstration projects by coordinating the right sort of vectors. Thank you very much.
I think from what we all know and what we've all heard, the best way forward based on this is it to benchmark Nigeria against the countries that have developed. What can Nigeria do to skip the 5-year gap? And is it just the government, or what role should the private partnership take? So I think I'll just throw that first the paper presentation and then to other members, please.
Yeah, so it's indeed important to think about benchmarking against other countries in order to sort of learn lessons and say, well, other countries have done particular things to transform, have put in place particular policies and have done it in a particular way. And I think that is useful. And if you think about the lessons, then it is indeed right to emphasize that it's not just the public, it's the public and the private sector that together play a role. And this is not something that is very easy to do. And because if you look at the successful Asian countries, and how they have set up public-private partnerships or interacted with the public and the private sector, then there's no one single narrow institutional setup in a narrow sense that have done that. So the form isn't clear. You don't know exactly what form it should take. However, the functions are very clear, so that you need to be able to have trust between the public and the private sector. You need to have a sort of a relationship of reciprocity. So if the public sector does something, then the private sector should do something, and that the two sides don't renege on contracts. They have some performance contracts between the two. So it is indeed important to think about this informal and formal way of interacting, so effective state-based relations. And this starts from a coordinating mechanism, a strong coordinating mechanism within the federal ministry, I would say. Think about that and make sure that the relationship with the private sector are organized well, and that the discussions that take place discuss economic transformation. Now then, I think these discussions of the public and private sector could then lead to think about finding constraints to grow, and they could also help to identify what sort of projects could demonstrate this focus on export competitiveness that can show that the public and private sector can join hands and can actually start a manufacturing plant within a couple of months. Just one example, and then I hand over to the rest of the in Ethiopia. The then minister, the then prime minister, president was introduced by Justin Lin with a Chinese company, and they were discussing matters of putting a manufacturing plant in place, a shoe factory, and 3 months later, the shoe factory started operations, and they created 1,500 jobs. So they were able to do that in 3 months' time by making sure that actions were coordinated. Is this something that Nigeria can do as well?
Would you envisage a situation where the government and the private sector agree on certain sectors and promote those sectors in line with what you just said? Or because I know different interests all over the place, people have already established businesses, policies, somersault, and so on. What would be your own contribution, please?
First of all, for the private sector, what is perhaps most important is the environment that is created. Because if you look at other models that have been alluded to, it is the private sector that actually plays the biggest role in driving the economy. And sometimes you don't even need to tell the private sector what to do. What you need to do is just to create the space. And you'll be amazed what people could do. When we had the transformation we had in the entertainment industry, it wasn't a deliberate policy of government. There was no specific pointer that go and develop this sector. But it is just a question of an environment that was there for the youth, particularly the younger generation, to be able to express themselves. And because the sector was such a sector that the barriers to entry were not too high, it was easy for a lot of youths to go into that sector. So what is perhaps very important is for us to open as much of the economic space as possible for private sector to play its role as the engine of growth. That is what is paramount. The time we had the telecoms, it wasn't so much because Nigeria was the most attractive place to do business. But Nigeria offered one of the best opportunities for investment. The risk may be high, but I think investors are more interested in whether the returns can match the risk. And the more of that we do, I mean, while many investors in the Western world were worrying about risk, were doing country risk analysis and all of that, you had MTN and the rest of them from South Africa that quickly jumped in here and took position. Today, they are the envy of many of these investors. So we need to replicate that across sectors, and we need to do that very quickly. Because the government hasn't got the resources to put down this investment. So we need to quickly roll out. I mean, we have seen what has happened in aviation. Aviation sector today in Nigeria is driven by the private sector. At the time, we had only Nigeria Airways. The media today, I mean, Bosin is here and his colleagues, they are from the private sector. If you look at the schools, look at the hospitals, all these sectors are driven by the private sector. So we need to move fast. I mean, for instance, I'm happy that although it's coming rather late, the reforms we are now seeing in the petroleum sector. This is one sector that will have even served as a locomotive to move other sectors of the economy. But the reforms are coming very slowly, but thank God they are almost getting here. Because by now, we should have had multiples of private refineries, refining products and exporting products. But because of the policy space, and because of the issue of political economy, which was also very high, highlighted in this report, many of these things have not happened. We have issues with road infrastructure, with railways, with our airports. These are areas that offer tremendous opportunities.
That is said, look, we don't deliberately have to identify those sectors, but two key things I need to talk about is first, is a little bit issue of trust. I think there is no trust between both the private sector and the government sector. And I'll tell you this. I mean, the whole issue of subsidy removal, flexible exchange rate, are things that we've been talking about for the last 1 year. If anybody sat back and look at the cost of this to us, I mean, I don't know where we're going to write 10 naira at now. 284, 280 or 300. People have got it at a far cheaper price. If people just listen to the fact that it's not about devaluation, it's about flexible exchange rate that allow for supply. But what do you give when you have a rate and there is no liquidity in the market? Obviously, what made everybody give up was that there was no liquidity. So there needs to be trust between both the public sector and the private sector. The second thing again he talked about, which again before I answer the question, is the fact of, he alluded to the point about transformative policy. The policy decisions, first and foremost, the timing of policy, the consistency of policy. One of the reasons why the private sector find it difficult is that means significant somersault of policy. One threat, you want me to go to this area, resources have been mobilized, and 2 years down the line, it's all reversed. So you ask yourself, as an investor of capital, how much do I want to do? A lot of our people have been talked to importing, buying and selling, not because they didn't want to really invest, but because policy of government is not consistent. Now, I'm glad we are alluding to what we've done in cement industry. And each anybody make a showcase of what has happened in cement industry, we'll talk about what environment was made for that. The significant 4 or 5 years environment that was given to enable cement to grow. Now, you've talked about the the National Industrial Master Plan, and there are 14 sectors there. And for me, it doesn't matter whether we discuss it, whether it's on government or not. What is important is both government and private sector to sit down and understand what does it mean, what does it require, what support will it give ourselves. We're talking about sugar, we're talking about the automobile. Let's sit down. I mean, we might try our hands on 14, and I find out that 2 or 3 of them will be the ones that will be very, very, very competitive. So what I will say therefore is that there's a need for stakeholders validation, regular stakeholder communication, and like he said, if you start a policy and in the midst of it you find out that it's not right, don't stop us from saying, you know what, we got it all wrong. Let's solve it. But there has to be that trust and sincerity, and we must carry each other along. There are occasions where we will sit down, people spend, the private sector spend a lot of time. Look, they are profit makers, but they should make profit. Again, so we need to look at all this thing. I'm not going to talk clearly here with the area of skills we talked about, and we talk about these skills over and over again. And some of us are beginning to believe that maybe our schools have failed, and we should shut our doors and not look at schools. And we should try to look at industry and look at how industry can get the required skill. Because what do I gain where you go to school and yet what comes out can't work? So maybe we need to focus on what does industry require and look at those that have done that and see how we can grow it. So we will not prescribe, but let's look at what we all talk to them too. But I was going to ask a question to him, and something I don't really agree with the paper, which is part of it. When he was saying that we should look at international, that many of us, our policies have been at import substitution or local. For me, whether it's consumed locally and I don't I don't have to look for money to import. What do I lose? So long as the environment is competitive, so long as it's good enough and the products can reach both local demand and can be exported, what's the problem with it? Because I saw that the model should look at international, we should not be looking at import substitution. I'm sure the bulk of what we're looking at in terms of refinery, oil, cement, stem from the fact that there is huge local demand for it. And if we're good enough, we get a local demand, and we then can export. So I think it's a competitive environment all around that is important. It's not whether it is local or external. That's what I think.
What Nigeria has done is that we've traditionally used exports from oil to fund our imports. But when you look at the deficit now, 2014, Nigeria earned $70 billion in oil exports. In 2015, Nigeria earned $40 billion. So the nation has lost $30 billion. Now, for any economy, that is just phenomenal. Thank you. It's huge. Now we must now earn foreign exchange from other baskets. And when you showed in your slide and you looked at the diversification of the economy, and you saw what it was only oil, that was driving our foreign exchange, our earnings. But the economy was already diversified, goods and services, IT, everything really. But we are not exporting. When we were looking at the zero oil plan, which we signed, we looked at the top 20 economies in the world. Now, they were all exporters, but only 3 of them were exporting oil. You're starting from China at the top end, at top of the range, $2.4 trillion of exports. Come down, second, America, 1.6 trillion, and then Germany, 938 billion. Coming down, it's the 3 countries only exporting oil, while Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. But sitting on top of 2 of them was Mexico. Mexico, people forget oil producing economy, but they were exporting over $298 billion in exports, agribusiness, everything, taking advantage of the North America Free Trade Alliance and exporting to America and creating jobs. So if we're not exporting, we really are not going to grow. We must just export, and export. We must prepare our economy to be an exporting economy. And that must not be only oil that we export. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, CEO Export Promotion Council. Export is about the private sector. It is the private sector that will export. And when you export, you are exporting in a global market. And if you are not competitive, there's no way you can export successfully. Look at even the structure of the economy. How many of our sectors have competitiveness? There's an elaborate write-up in the report about factor productivity, sector productivity, and so on and so forth. Our agricultural sector accounts for about 22-23% of GDP. What is the productivity in agriculture? How much revenue do we get from agriculture? Virtually nothing. Because the productivity is so low. The farmers in this country are one of the poorest people. You see them around in the villages. What do they have to show? So it comes back to the issue of competitiveness. And when we are building an economy and building our sectors, the competitiveness parameter should not just be local. As much as possible, it has to be international. Because if you are talking of export, you are competing internationally. The Export Promotion Council is not in a position to provide infrastructure that will make a company competitive. You can only facilitate, create market, give us information, and maybe support logistics. But we have to produce the market, we have to produce the product with the right packaging, with the right quality, with the right price. And if the environment is not enabling, you cannot deliver that. So that is very key. And again, I want to also make the point, because we have a negative notion about imports. Even the China that the CEO of NEPC alluded to, annually China imports close to 2 trillion worth of imports. Sometimes you need to import to be able to export. That is also important. But here, there is this perception that you are importing so much, you are importing so much, and as if all the imports are consumption. No. Some of these imports, you need them to add value and export, because if you look at our sectors, they have various components of local content. Some of our industries, some of them have 20%, some of them have 10%, some of them have 30%. But if they don't have that import content, there is no way they can perform. That is one. Secondly, about trade policy, because one of the things we often get wrong is in the area of trade policy. And that is about feeling that the best way to craft a trade policy is to develop a trade policy that will protect local industries. That is not always the right thing. I mean, if you talk to the customs, they have lost close to 200 billion in the last 6 months or so because of some of these policies. I heard the CGO of Customs lamenting about how some of the forest policy has affected government revenue. And government needs revenue to be able to fix some of this infrastructure that you talk about. So there's a need for proper alignment of all these things, the trade policy, the industrial policy, and for us to broaden our mind and look at it and make sure that our goal should be competitive. Because if you are not competitive, the small good products from China will still come and compete with us here. And that is why many industries are not operating suboptimally. So let me stop there and allow.
And that countries have not really transformed without focusing on the international economy. So you can't really do it focusing only on the domestic economy. But it also has its basis in the microeconometric studies. So, for example, we looked at firm productivity, and we looked at the data from the World Bank Enterprise Survey data. And you look at productivity, you look at exporters and non-exporters. And exporters are more productive than non-exporters. And we can go further than that. Not just outright, but also by John Page, who's done an action study covering 10, 12 low-income countries and middle-income countries. And he looked at the link between exports and productivity. And it's not only that higher productivity firms are exporting, it's also by exporting you gain productivity as well. You learn. And that's also the story in Korea, for example. They also learned by exporting, by being packed into the international network, building a value chain to import, to export. So export is really, really important. So the export push part of the paper is, I really want to emphasize. It doesn't mean that alone is important. It doesn't mean that domestic policies are not important. Of course, skills and the like, and domestic data is really important. But make sure you also focus on competitiveness and export push.
And I'm happy that the custom people are here. In Ghana, in protecting, in order to ensure that there is solar energy all over the place and renewable, their solar panels don't attract. It's not zero imported. In Nigeria, it's 5%. And if you do that, you can imagine how much you can enable the MSMEs, how much you can even work on a farm cluster, then increase the productivity, if only we embed all of those things. So that's why we say policies must be consistent, they must talk to each other and leave the people. I mean, today, the money people spend on power, the time they waste on power, is making them a lot ineffective. I mean, and if we can have all these other ones support there, they can do a great deal.
We've already talked enough about policies. I'm not going to talk about policies again. But I'll mention about the trade policy. We are going to conclude on the trade policy very soon. Again, it has gone out for review. I know, again, we have support from GIZ on this one, and we hope to finalize the trade policy as soon as possible. Enabling environment and the ease of doing business. Again, the National Assembly has been deeply involved. The Nigerian Bar Association has been deeply involved. We've had several sessions in Lagos. Again, the two states that we're taking as samples were Lagos and Kano for obvious reasons. Again, stakeholders forum has been held in both places. What has come out of that is that there has to be a closer engagement, not just with the state governments, but in fact, even the local governments. So that is also going to be ongoing. And the Honourable Minister is championing that particular engagement. And one of the other things that we want to do is visa application. We hope that by December, we would have gotten approval for visa on arrival for Nigeria. And I think just recently it was also announced that for 8 other countries in Africa, you would not require a visa entry, apart from the ECOWAS countries. So we're also working on trying to make it easier to start business in Nigeria. Private sector, again, we are your, should I say, back runners, because we need you. We can't do this without the private sector. I think government has never imagined that you can do anything, especially this industrialization or diversification, without the private sector. So yes, we would continue to engage, we will continue to dialogue, and we will continue to listen. The only thing is that whatever we do come up with has to be for the good of everybody in the sector, not just for particular sectors. By that I don't mean we only do for cement and not do for tomatoes or something like that. Monitoring of policy, yes, I think that's very important for us. I think this is one of the takeaways that I would do. The think tank too is also something I'll take away from here. I think I've responded to most of the issues. The commodities exchange, yes, it's been revitalized because we've realized that we can't do anything with agric if we don't bring back the commodities on board. So action is being taken on that. So I think on that note, I would just like to thank everybody. I would like to thank our researchers for a wonderful job, and again for reminding us on the work that we have to do to get where we need to be, and not talk as usual. For the private sector, yes, we appreciate your agitation and the need for us to have urgent, quick decisions on our policies so that we can move forward. And then from NEPC, we look forward to the implementation of the Zero Plan. I think I would like to thank everybody for this opportunity and the audience for your wonderful contributions, and request that you please kindly continue to do so. We will get there by the grace of God. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the panelists for what was a very rich discussion, I'm sure you'll all agree. 3 thoughts which came across, very high-level thoughts as the discussion was going on. Firstly, the scale of the economic challenge that Nigeria is now facing. With negative growth in the first quarter, the Monetary Policy Committee warning of potential recession ahead. It's a very tough time for Nigeria on the economy side, and it looks like, from what the government is saying, it's about to get tougher. We all know what that means in practice. I'm sure everyone in this room knows people who don't have jobs, or have jobs where there's no dignity in labour, as the DG of NEPC was talking about earlier. There is a real impact of carrying on with business as usual and not getting it right. I came to Nigeria 10 years ago. I was actually funded by ODI back then. And we were having the same discussions around diversification, and a number of policies, some of which have cropped up time and time again, were being pursued. And this issue in Dirk's paper about it cannot be business as usual, I think that is really critical here, because the issues have not changed in Nigeria over the 10 years I've been here, but the need to actually tackle them, the cost of not taking action has increased dramatically. Really rich discussions, and I really hope that Nigeria can really rise to the occasion and get it right this time. The second area, there was very strong level of agreement across the panel about the need for collaboration between the private sector and government. I mean, I didn't hear anyone speaking against that. I mean, this is really about the how and how we get it right and how we make sure that it isn't business as usual in the right way. And that dialogue will be critical to make sure that mistakes of the past aren't pursued. The third and final area to say is that, especially with the policy changes of the past couple of weeks from the government, I think there's a real opportunity now, one which there hasn't been for a long time, to really try and get competitiveness at the heart of the economic approach for Nigeria. I was delighted to hear about the zero oil export strategy from NEPC, and I think that's a very productive area, and also to hear about the discussions around cashew nuts. Those of you who don't know me, I have a Nigerian wife and I have 2 little boys who hold Nigerian passports, and every now and then my Britishness slips off and I put a Nigerian cap on my head and I start showing the outrage that many Nigerians in this room will show when you see those things that frustrate you. And for me, I was on a BA flight the other day, and when they were handing out the snacks, there was a little very beautifully packaged bag of cashew nuts that came round, and I thought, wow, this is lovely. And I opened it up, beautifully toasted cashew nuts, perfectly seasoned. I looked on the back of the bag and it said, made in Kenya.
Yeah.
How can? How can?
How can that happen?
My Nigerian outrage. Now, the typical government response from the past would be, right, there's something we can produce, someone else is producing it, let's ban the people who are producing it and try and get production. And that's the approach that's been pursued time and time again. And it hasn't really yielded that dynamic economy, that private sector growth-led economy that Nigeria really needs if it's to get its growth back on track. So instead, this idea of actually speaking to the private sector and finding out, okay, how can we do it so that the quality of Nigerian cashew nuts is higher than the quality of Kenyan cashew nuts, so people don't buy it or don't purchase it because they have to, because there's no other choice, but because they purchase it because they want to. And I think this is the opportunity now to get that competitiveness part into Nigerian economic strategy. So I would like to thank the panel. I mean, as I said, a really rich discussion. The Honourable Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, thank you for your opening speech and your very competent and capable chairing of the panel. The DG NEPC, thank you. The DG of NEPC, it's great to hear about the things that you've got on at the moment in this area, and this time when oil is disappearing, your role has become more and more important in government as people are recognising it. And also to our 2 representatives of the private sector advocacy organisations over here, and you have shown yourselves to be the foremost of Nigeria's private sector advocacy organisations through the richness of your discussions today and your input. So thank you so much for coming. And finally, I'd like to thank ODI for the wonderful report. I would beg all of you, please look through that report. Really, there's a lot of very good stuff. Wonderful comparisons with other countries to look at and to see how Nigeria is doing. Please take time to read it, and please, I would urge you to hand in your feedback forms at the end. So thank you very much all for coming. Thank you for sitting through this. Oh, sorry, the most important of all. Thank you so much, Bosun, for his very able anchoring of the occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll have lunch. It's good to be here. We'll have lunch. On the way out, the lunch will be at the Buka. We all know it's the only expensive Buka in Nigeria because it's in this 5-star hotel. So you get your sleep as you sleep out of the room. Thank you very much, everyone. On behalf of the ODI, I appreciate your coming. Do have a great day. Thank you very much.